today, we're going to talk about the idea of spiritual forces and stuff like that. And the idea that sometimes there's something behind the curtain that's really pulling the strings. And of course, that's no more obvious than in most of our memories than watching The Wizard of Oz and that great and powerful Oz, right? That big terrifying being. And in reality, it's really just the guy behind the curtain. And fortunately, Toto was wise enough to go and pull the curtain back and check that out. Just a man from Kansas, right? So we've been studying the concept of human governments through the course of time, and Yahweh's been revealing that these terrible, evil governments that have been in existence, do exist and will exist in the future, that he is, even though that they exist, he is still in control over all of that as it goes. But he reveals this stuff, and as he's revealing it, as Daniel has been getting older and wiser in his walk with the Lord, he's getting more and more trouble. As you've probably noticed, the last couple times we've talked about Daniel, he's not sleeping, he's terrified, and today he's going to have an even greater incident than before. But we're going to look behind the curtain at some of these global governments that are out there and to see who's really pulling the levers in the spiritual battle. And again, the whole book of Daniel is about the concept of God being in control, despite who seems to be sitting in these seats of power throughout history, not just at a particular time, not just in a particular place, but throughout history and globally as we go. And then the question then has always been, how do we live faithfully in the midst of these things, in the midst of these governments that are in control? We've been studying that Daniel is written in two chiasms. We talked about the first chiasm earlier in the year. We finished that, ending with the idea that in the first chiasm that we need to come humbly, especially world leaders need to come humbly before the God who is in control. And in the second chiasm, we've been talking about the idea, we've been kind of trekking through these different chapters. Daniel 8, we saw the prophecy of the second and third kingdoms in that statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had at the beginning of the book, and we talk about the second and third kingdoms. And that prophecy is so disturbing that Daniel becomes sick. We talked about that earlier. And then as we get into Daniel chapter 9, most of the rest of the chiasm is in Daniel chapter 9, the different pieces of that as they come together. It's years after Daniel chapter 8, and yet he's still being disturbed by it. He's so distraught, he begins to pray. He learns in the midst of that chiasmic structure, you can see the two visions of the Messiah, the actual date the Messiah would come into town and that he would arrive. And we learned that it was on Palm Sunday, which again we'll be celebrating next week. But also, and this is probably something that terribly disturbed him, but that the Messiah that they've been waiting so diligently for, especially guys like him, was going to be cut off. He was going to be killed, and that had to be terrifying for him, because along with him being destroyed also was the temple and the kingdom that they didn't even have back yet. And all of a sudden we're going to lose it again. So he's very disturbed by that. So we get to chapters 10, 11, and 12, which is the bottom part of the chiasm here, chiasmic structure. And 10, 11, and 12 are all the same incident. It's the biggest chunk that we've dealt with. And as we do that, though, chapter 10 has a specific thing. 11 and 12 are going to be the third and fourth kingdoms. But leading up into that, he has an incident that I want to talk about and spend a little bit of time on, because I think it's worth that for us. So Daniel chapter 10 is where we're going to start today, beginning at verse 1. In the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So if we go back to our timeline there, the blue ones are Babylonian Empire, then it transitioned to the Medo-Persian Empire that's there with King Darius. Darius becomes the Persian king, the first Persian king in 539. He rules for nearly 2 years. We're rounding off these numbers, by the way, so the math isn't always perfect on this, but we're rounding off the years in this. 538, he becomes the Persian king. Cyrus becomes the Persian king. he makes the first decree that the Jews are freed and released to go back to the land if they want to. About 538, this is kind of leading up to where we are now in the story, which is really interesting. Historically, we know about 50,000 of the more than 1 million Jews that had been sent into exile go back. So a very small number of people, and this is where we read book of Ezra, Nehemiah, those books happen in this time frame. So that's happening there. So I think it's probably a little disturbing. Daniel doesn't have the freedom to go, as he's not an employee of the court. He's more like a slave of the court. He has to stay. He can advocate for his people. Of course, he's done that, but he doesn't have the freedom to go. We'll find that some of the other leaders, they'll be able to come before the king and ask the favors of the king to be able to go back. But it probably disturbs him that, wait a minute, our land is back. We can be rebuilding. Why aren't you people going? Get out of here. And so that's part of, he's already had this vision of when the temple's going to be built and when the walls are going to be built and those kinds of things. And so he knows that stuff can be fulfilled, but the people just aren't excited about it, which is like, wait a minute, we've been slaves. Why wouldn't you go back? God's giving us, he's restoring our land to us and those kinds of things. So then we get to 535 BC. It's the third year of Cyrus, the king, and that's where we're going to talk about today, chapter 10, and the rest of the book follow from here. So Daniel at this point is at least 85 years old, and he's still kicking, which is pretty amazing when you look at the average ages throughout the years, the Middle Ages, and even early American years. Hitting 85 was a pretty big deal, so you can imagine back then. But he was living in the palace as well, so he had some advantages over people that didn't have. So Daniel chapter 10, beginning again at verse 1, in the third year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, not Babylon, a word was revealed to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, and the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood the word, and he had understanding of the vision, and this new vision that he had made him nauseous. And in those days, Daniel, was in mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint things myself for full 3 weeks. This is when people talk about a Daniel fast. This is where that comes from. So this is for a specific purpose. This isn't meant to be a help thing. I'm trying to get God's attention because I'm upset. This is like really bothering me. So, and he says, I didn't anoint myself for a full 3 weeks. So it's interesting. First of all, underline the full 3 weeks in there, 21 days. That's going to come back a couple times in here. I want you to start asking yourself, why would he continue to mention specifically? He doesn't say for almost a month. He specifically says for 3 weeks. But he's troubled. And when you anoint yourself, it's kind of like when you take a bath and you put some stuff in your hair and you wash your face. That's what they do. They would anoint themselves. They put oil on themselves. And that was like, you're ready to go for work once you've anointed yourself. Yeah.
In this version here, it says, I don't know if this makes a difference, this one word, but it says, he did not anoint himself at all for the full 3 weeks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the full 3 weeks. It's not a specific period of time, although we'll find out in a little bit, this was during Passover is happening in this season too, what is Passover? Deliverance from an evil empire to go back to your land. So it is during the season. The passage doesn't make a big deal of the fact that that's happening, but it does mention that is the time period that we're dealing in. So, right. So on verse 4, it says, on the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, again, the 24th day of the first month, that is the 24th day of Nisan. Pesach, Passover, is on the 15th day of the month. And so again, they're celebrating that. And then verse 5 says, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz. Uphaz was a city that was known for its like quality gold. The gold that you really wanted was from Uphaz. So this was a quality, whatever this guy had, it was the best. Clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. So far, what we're hearing, if you look at the book of Revelation, when John has his vision of Jesus on the island of Patmos, it's the same description: linen, golden sash, those same descriptions so far coming out. In fact, some of the stuff we're gonna hear about, flames, lightning from his eyes is the same vision as well. His body was like beryl, which is actually kind of a greenish color. His face was like the appearance of lightning. His eyes were flaming torches. His arms and legs like of burnished bronze, so more of a black skin. The sound of his words like the sound of the multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled and hid themselves. This is not an unusual response in visions. In fact, in The Chosen, if you saw episodes 1 and 2 of season 5, Jesus is in the temple and he's talking, and he hears the Father affirm what he's doing as he prays, and the people in the crowd are like, wait a minute. I heard lightning, but it sounded like a voice, and this is the same kind of thing that's happening there. Paul has the vision of Damascus. The people here, they're terrified. They know something terrifying is happening, and they fall. Jesus's baptism, again, they hear a voice from heaven, and they think that it's thunder at the same time. So these guys panic. They take off. They leave Daniel all by himself, which is like, thanks, guys. Appreciate your, what's going on. Verse 8 says, so I was left alone, and I saw a great vision, and no strength was left in me. Well, of course, you've been fasting for 21 days. Now, again, this isn't like he hasn't eaten anything for 21 days. He's just removed certain things from his diet. So he's not absolutely famished, but it's to the point, he's being serious about this. So it's not like he just didn't eat chocolate. He was definitely only eating what was the bare necessities. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, which I think is interesting way. I've never said I thought I have a radiant appearance, but clearly he did. I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. He passed out. I don't know how else you would say that. He passed out. And behold, verse 10, a hand touched me. Underline that because it's an important moment. A hand touched me and sent me trembling on my hands and knees. He begins to get up, and he said to me, "Oh, Daniel, man greatly loved." I love this. And you can highlight that too, because that's just a beautiful thing there's an affirmation in there. I think part of this goes back to the fact that there is some terror that's in there for sure. He tells us that he's passing out in terror of what's going on. And so, Daniel, you're dearly loved. Man, dearly loved. He's totally affirming him. Understand the words that I speak and stand up right now, for I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken to me, I stood up trembling. He's still not healed. He's still got a little bit in him. He's only got a little bit of extra strength enough to be able to get off his feet. Then he said to me, "Fear not, Daniel." There it is again. "From the first day that you set your heart to understand and be humbled yourself before your God." When was that first day? 3 weeks ago, 3 full weeks ago, right? 21 days ago, that from that very first day that you humbled yourself before your God, before that first day, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. Here's the interesting thing. Sometimes Daniel's been praying for 3 weeks and he's not got an answer. Daniel wants him to know, 1, you're loved, 2, God heard your prayers, and 3, it's taken me 3 weeks to get here. Right? So just because you haven't gotten an answer to your prayer doesn't mean God hasn't already sent the answer. Doesn't mean that it's not on its way. Doesn't mean that he hasn't heard you. It's just, it hasn't gotten to you yet. Maybe. There's other parts of that as well. But the other thing is, his prayers impacted the spiritual world. The angel was sent because of his prayers. Because he prayed, God heard and God answered. So our prayers do have an impact as we go. God sent him the answer. Verse 13 says, "Then the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days. Why do you think he mentions that time? 21 days. Any guesses?
Is it the time that you're living?
The time that it's been there. Angels are impacted by time. They don't just get to time travel. They don't get, they are both, and we're gonna see in a little bit later, another thing that they're limited by time. And it's the same time that you and I, from the day you first prayed until now, I have been on my way to try and get to you, but I was intercepted by this guy called the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia. Do you think it was the guy that was on the throne? No, this is a spiritual battle that's happening between two spiritual beings, and one of them has a title related to where they are. He's in authority over the region that they are currently in, which is they're in Persia, right? We're talking about in the third year of Cyrus, the king of Persia. Well, it's not him that we're talking about, but there is a prince of a power behind the king of Persia who has the ability to stop the messengers of God from doing what God has sent them to do. That's hugely significant. You could bypass this and just read the story, but if we don't pay attention to the fact that, so what we learned about angels here in this moment is they are limited by time. And it's our time. It's not like a day with the Lord is 1,000 years. He's different. These are created beings that live under the same laws of the universe that we live under. And this angel was sent, and he's been in a battle with other things. And again, sometimes it takes time for your answer to your prayers to make it to you, not because God is slow, but because the angel that he is sent to deliver that message or to make it happen for you is being delayed. So what's your part in that?
To be obedient and faithful.
Continue to pray.
Persevere.
Continue to engage in the spiritual battle that is, help that angel. Help that messenger on the way. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left with the kings of Persia. Oh my goodness. What other things do you notice in this passage?
Well, Michael, or John Travolta came and helped me.
All right. Okay.
There's princes and kings.
Princes and kings, and also
Michael.
Both, earthly and both in the spiritual realm.
chief princes, earthly spiritual realm.
Yeah.
But it's not just princes, there's chief, so there's a hierarchy of these spiritual beings that are there. There's princes, chief princes, kings, and they're not on the same side, all of them. It's interesting that we hear kings on the side of those that are on the enemy. None of the princes that are on God's side take the title of king. But on the other side, they seem to feel the freedom to take that title. Well, yes, and power impacts the spiritual realm. They are looking for power just like human.
Satan fell.
Spiritual power corrupts just like,
Yeah.
right? Exactly the same way. So the Prince of Persia is an angelic power. Michael is a chief prince. There are kings of Persia, which means there's several of them that are, I don't know, sharing authority at this point, which is really interesting because that's actually what happened at the end of the Babylonian Empire. Remember Nabonidus and his son Belshazzar, they shared power. They are co-reigning at the same time. So it's interesting, even the demons kind of mimic that as well. There's this hierarchy there. It took 21 days, so they're limited. There are at least, it says by the end, we have this angel, which is probably Gabriel, and then Michael, who are named. But these two are fighting all these other angels, and it seems to be a kind of an equal battle at this point. So these two are pretty bad, you know what, in terms of the spiritual warfare. And then they're also taking on these kings of Persia, verse 14, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days, for this vision is for the days to come. It's about the end times. The spiritual warfare information, the spiritual warfare was preventing this information from getting to Daniel. Verse 15. There was, when he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and was mute. He's standing, he still isn't fully able to, in the presence of at least this one, there appears as we go through this, that there are multiple beings. There's one specifically, I don't know if there's different classes of beings that are with him, I don't want to say different angels because clearly cherubim and angels are different and seraphim are also there. So whatever the combo that was there, we're going to hear about some others. The ones that look like humans tend to be the angels. So there's probably other angels that were present at this point. But he is so in awe of whatever he's seeing. I saw a lot of pictures, and AI is able to create a lot of really unique art. And this was probably the one, it was by the river, that fits most appropriately. There were some that were, different, but this is, I don't have any clue how real this was to Daniel, but this was the one that fit the description, I think, a little better than some of the others. But regardless, he's still in awe of it, still not quite able, he's got his eyes turned down, still not able to speak. And behold, one like the likeness of the children of men, another one of them that was there, who looked like a human, came over and touched me on the lips. This is the second touch along the way. So it's increasing his, whatever the healing was that he needed to be able to speak. Then I opened my mouth and spoke, and I said to him who stood before me, he finally can speak. Oh, my Lord, by reason of the vision, pains have come upon me, and I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For no strength remains in me, and no breath is in me. It's interesting to me because everybody's so excited about talking about end times, but here's a guy who had an intimate walk with Jesus and an amount of faith that is humbling to consider. And yet he saw the details of the end times, and it knocked him flat, literally. And so as we dive into these visions of Book of Revelation and stuff like that, God has given us in our limited ability to understand without being knocked flat on the floor. So always understand when you're talking about apocalyptic literature, that God is only giving us what we can stand until the time is revealed that you need to know more, because it's too much. There's too much power, there's too much, all of that's in there for us. And just be in awe of the amazingness of what is revealed to us and the mystery that is there. Does that make sense? All right. Verse 18. And again, the appearance of one having the appearance of man. So there's at least three of them that are there. Touched me, third time he's been touched, and strengthened me. And he said to me, "Oh man, greatly loved." I smile every time I hit these passages because it just feels so beautiful, because it didn't have to be that way. Fear not, peace be with you, be strong and of courage. And he was, again, so overwhelmed that he couldn't speak, he couldn't stand at one point, and the message says to him, peace, strength, courage. And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." Then he said, "Do you know why I've come to you? But now I have to return to the fight. The battle has been happening as they speak. The battle continues." He just stepped out of the battle for a minute, maybe because battle said, "Hey," Michael came along and said, "Hey, I'll take care of this guy. You go talk to Daniel, and then as soon as you're done, come back and join it." Seems to be what's happening here. But the battle continues as they speak, and this angel, probably Gabriel, is excited to get back into the fight again. Against the prince of Persia, and when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece is coming. We know that the battle's getting worse. Because remember that vision you saw of the goat that's bounding quickly over? It's on its way. That's going to happen. The battle's going to get worse along the way. And I need to get back to the fight. Verse 21, but I tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these except Daniel, your prince. Or Michael, your prince. So next week next time we talk about Daniel, we will talk about the vision that he came to deliver in chapters 11 and 12. And but I wanted to stop here in recognition of the spiritual warfare, because this is an important, we shouldn't just skip to the vision. We should deal with the fact that there, especially the whole purpose of us addressing the book of Daniel anyway, when we're talking about living in the midst of these human empires and how do we live faithfully. We can't do that if we don't recognize the spiritual battle that's happening behind all the empires of the world. And not just at an empire level, even farther or lower below that as well. So, the problem is, and we go back to that idea that power corrupts, right? And that is also true in the angelic realm. The reason that there is spiritual or heavenly warfare is not because God created two sides, a good side and a bad side, and they're fighting each other, and it's just this eternal battle that's always going to happen, which amazingly is what the world believes. They just believe that there's just two forces out there, the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, the dark and the sun. It's just it's the eternal battle that's out there. And they believe that that is true, but it's not. It's because God created them good in the first place. They rebelled by choice, they became evil, and that's where the battle started. A couple things I want you to notice about this. Michael is the prince of Israel, but they're not in Israel. They're in Babylon. So it's not these powers are, although they have the names of a region, they're not limited regionally. Michael comes to help the people in Babylon, the Israel people in Babylon. It took Gabriel 3 weeks battling just to get there, which means time impacts angels too. And as does geography, it takes them time to get places as they go, as they battle. So, and the other thing is that not every angel is a prince. That's important to know again, that they're there. But again, we live in a world that believes that there's good versus bad, angel versus demon, God versus Satan, as if they're these equal and opposite things that are happening. So I want to just lay out a couple things as we go. First of all, angelic beings are they're created beings. Psalm 148, verse 25. Specifically, they were created by Jesus. He's the one who created them. There's a bunch of passages that are listed there. The important thing to notice there, because there's a whole group of people that will talk about Jesus being Michael the archangel. He is one of the angels. Well, he can't create angels he can't be one of them if he's the one who created them. And so there's lots of passages that go there. They're also created for a purpose. Colossians chapter 1 says they're created for Jesus and for God's pleasure, Revelation chapter 4. They were created good. I think this is part of the first part of that. Job 38 says, all the angels sang with joy at creation. And so all the angels were present at creation when God is putting it all together, just amazed at how all this plays itself out. And in Genesis 1 chapter and chapters 1 and 2, everything is good. And then in chapter 3, everything begins to fall apart because there's some angels that are not good at that point. And so if they were present in chapters 1 and 2 and at creation, then they are all good. God created them good, but he created them to love him, which means they were created to have a choice. And someplace along the line, I'll talk about some of the passages real quick, they made a choice. They were created to be good. They were created good, not to be good. They were created good. You and I, when we're born into a world that already has sin and selfishness in existence. So we're born in a corrupted environment. These angels were created one by one in a non-corrupted environment. So their sin, their fall is different from each of ours. Theirs is more similar to Adam and Eve. Archie, leave it alone. Archie, no baby. Hey. Archie, you know your name. No begging. So, where was I? They're all good. They're all created good. Yeah, we'll get to the fall and talk a little bit more about that in a second. But a couple things. They have personalities. They have emotions. They have intellect. They have will. They have the ability to make choices. They have names like Michael and Gabriel. They have bodies. They have spiritual bodies. Jesus gets a spiritual body that is different after his resurrection. We don't know if Jesus's body is like what the angels have, but it is a real body that exists. And we see that when Abraham saw the angels, they appear as humans and stuff like that. They do have spatial limitations. They have to walk. They can't just beam themselves to some other place. They have time limitations as they get around to different places. And I think the implication of this is that Satan isn't personally trying to get it. You know, Satan may be out there, and I'm sure he's out there trying to get somebody, but it's probably not me, and it's probably not you. There's way bigger fish for him to be he can't be in all of our heads. He gets one person, one chance at one place and if he wants to come out to California, or he wants to go to Africa, or he wants to go to Rome, or he wants to go to Washington DC, he has to make the trip. How they do that, I don't know. Scripture doesn't tell us. But they have to make the trip to get there. They can only be in one place at one time, and it takes them time to get from one place to another. And so that's important to realize about them as well. They don't reproduce. They don't have parents or children or families. They aren't humans or died. You didn't have, your great grandma Susie isn't your guardian angel. That's not the way that works. They're not passed away people. They're individually created. For some reason, what's coming up in my mind is peeps. Peeps, they're individually created, one at a time. They come out of the machine, one at a time as they're created. They don't have kin. They're not related to each other genetically, biologically, or anything like that. And that's important because if you don't have kin, you can't have a kinsman redeemer. And a kinsman redeemer is cornerstone to our understanding of salvation. Because Jesus became human, he had to be human to die for humans, to be our kinsman redeemer. And so we can be saved because Jesus died for our sins. Angels cannot be saved because they don't have a kinsman. So their choice to rebel against God was permanent. They cannot be redeemed after that. Hebrews chapter 12 or chapter 2 talks about that as well. There's different classes of demons. We've talked about demons, angels, cherubs, seraphs, stuff like that. But in Genesis chapter 3, Satan, it's not, Satan isn't his name, it's his title. It means the adversary, fell. Isaiah chapter 14 tells us it was because of pride. He basically looked in the mirror one day and said, I deserve to be worshipped, not to be worshiping and serving this other. And he decides to convinces a bunch of angels to go along with him. Many joined him. Matthew 25 talks about their condemnation. They were created to love God, and therefore, in order to love, you have to have a choice. They chose to love their own desires rather than God's desires in the same way we do. And it happened at some point between the creation of the world and in Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and chapter 3. So in that period, that space between chapters, something happened in there between that they fell. They have lots of jobs and stuff like that we can talk about. If you wanted some resources on finding more about angels and demons and angelic beings, I have lots of resources on that for you if you're interested. But why is that important for us today? Behind that curtain of these massive human empires of the past, the devastating governments that exist today and those that will come in the future, there are some very real spiritual forces that are fighting for power, authority. And we participate in that battle, whether we realize or not. Angelic powers are real. Demons and angels are real. They fight each other. They fight us, and they're fighting for power over the earth. The battle happens as we speak, even now. They don't take Sabbath off. They don't the battle continues all the time. It's happening in every government around the world. It happens in every school board around the world. It happens in every city council. The difference being the level of influence and the amount of people and all kinds of things that go on there. So how are we supposed to live in the midst of that reality? It's one thing like, gosh, I don't even know how to vote, let alone how to pray, right? How do we do that? The first thing is to recognize that these spiritual princes and kings in some places do stand behind the presidents, the governors of this world. And there are powers behind our president, there are powers behind our governor, there are powers behind our city council members. The battle is only going to get tougher. We know that because we know the kingdoms are going to get worse and more powerful, right? So if it was getting tough in Daniel's era with the king of Prince coming, it's definitely going to get worse for us because that little horn is going to pop up, right? And he's going to be a bad dude. We need today the same thing that the angel brought to Daniel: peace and strength and courage. And miss that, right? Because we know who's got it in his hands. Doesn't matter what happens on the field, because we know who ultimately is in control. We need to pray, even fast. I don't think we have made fasting a significant part of our spiritual battles. I have had to try and force myself to get back into that habit. It's not an easy habit to get into. But that's part of the battle. Fasting, we know that Jesus did it. It's part of the battle. Part of the battle warfare, the weaponry that we are given. And here's something I want all of you to know, because I think all of us wrestle with this at some point. Your answer may be on the way, but it's stuck in a spiritual battle somewhere. I don't know if that's comforting or not. But sometimes I feel like, why hasn't God answered my prayers? Why haven't I heard it? And sometimes it's stuck in a spiritual battle. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's stuck in a spiritual battle for somewhere. And we can help that battle by praying. We can influence the spiritual world by praying. Many of us probably most of us are praying for healing of one form or another. We're praying for people in our lives that are important, that need to come to know Jesus before all of this stuff takes place, before the choices that they're making end them in a worse spot than they are now. We're praying, and it doesn't seem to, it's not happening right now. And I hope that this passage will give us some confidence that the answer's on the way. God has heard your prayer. We know that. He is a good God. There is an answer on its way for you. Sometimes it takes time. Here's the other thing about healing. Sometimes it takes more than one touch. So Daniel took him 3 touches in this passage, and he still doesn't seem to be 100% by the end of it. God may be slowly giving you the healing over time that you need. Sometimes he can heal, and sometimes he does it 100%. But sometimes he does it over time. And sometimes that hand is through a doctor, or through medicine, or through us making the choice to make lifestyle changes in our lives. All of that is a part of the way God can heal us. Sometimes, though, we just need one more touch. Daniel was physically weak. He was sick from the visions and forced himself to be weaker by fasting. Yet he was strong spiritually. You don't have to be physically strong. You can be laid out on your back in a coma and still fighting spiritually. Still just as strong, or even stronger than some capable people, some able-bodied people. Your physical condition does not impact the strength you have as a spiritual warrior. So, thoughts or comments on any of this?
So there's princes and kings and all these people that are behind all of the governments and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
I on that last passage there, when he said, you made it sound like when he said your prince, so the last verse or the last in that thing, it said your prince.
Yes.
Sounded like that Michael, is that Michael that was talking to him at that point?
No.
Was it Gabriel?
The prince was Michael. This is probably Gabriel. He's the only one we know his name.
Yeah. And so then he says to Daniel, your prince. But you said it was Israel. He was talking about the prince.
Daniel's from Israel. So this is the prince of Israel.
Israel.
Yeah.
Okay. He wasn't saying your prince, specifically yours.
Yeah, it wasn't
him.
Daniel's. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, are there angels that are like assigned to
Yeah.
everybody around that?
I don't know if there's one angel, like
Right,
if
right,
Bob is sitting over my shoulder every day. But there are angels that are given their job is to minister to us, and maybe God says, hey, you know what, they're gonna have a really bad day. I need you to go take care of them in the midst of that. It may be situational. Scripture doesn't give, I'm not aware of where God says you have a specific angel that sits over you. But God does send angels to minister to us.
It's kind of a common thing in society. People are always saying that, your guardian.
Yeah.
But it does allude to that in the book of Acts, right, where Peter was at the door, wasn't it Peter had been released
Hmm.
from prison,
Yep.
and they said, maybe it's his angel,
Mhm.
the people in the household,
Oh,
right?
right,
Yeah, we have to be careful though of implying that, his angel may have been common belief, maybe not
Understood,
specifically.
right,
Because, there's Paul is writing about baptism of the dead later, and just because it happened doesn't mean that that's
yeah, right.
what God
Okay.
intended.
Uh-huh.
But it could be,
It gives you.
I don't
maybe,
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Are all angels created equally?
no.
There's different
Well, angels are a class of spiritual being, cherubs are a class, seraphs are a class. I probably got them in the wrong order if that's, but we also know Paul talks about in Ephesians 6 that there are principalities and powers and dominions, and so there are different classes of them. Whether or not that, I think their abilities and powers based on their the class of spiritual being they are is different, but whether their ranking has different powers, I don't know. One's
See, when they're having these spiritual battles, do they have like the higher ranking one, send the lower ranking ones to battle the
they seem to work on, so the other piece of this is that we give they're very legalistic, and this is a whole different study. They're very legalistic, and so they can only take authority that's given to them or that's won. And so when you remember the old Bela Lugosi movie, he's outside, like, come to the window. As long as the kid doesn't open the window, the demon or the vampire has no authority to go. But once the window's open, it's over.
Right.
It's the same thing spiritually. We give them territory largely through sin, but we can invite them in by participating in things like Ouija boards, and you can invite them into your life by other spiritual practices, by offering, in the Old Testament, offering food on an altar of a pagan god. That was an invitation for them to have influence in your life. Spiritually, Jesus says Paul talks about the fact that when we are sleeping around, when the union of two people happens, that union is a legal union. And so whatever spiritual authority they are under, now you are under authority of that as well. And so that opens a door as well. So we have to be careful what territory we allow them to have. Again, a whole different study, but that was just a quick version.
Yeah, I like the spiritual warfare today. Charles and I were talking about that the other day, and Ty also asked for like Archangel Michael to protect him when he has bad dreams and such, but through Charles's injury, we've had a lot of battles, obviously, and he's had some spiritual battles. And he was like talking about it, like we were praying, of course, and asking for protection, but I don't know if anybody knows this, but he actually has a tattoo of Archangel Michael slaying Satan on his side, and he got that maybe a year before his accident, and I think it's a really good reminder that, you're always protected.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a time when stuff went crazy in our family when we were living in our other house, and we realized, okay, there's just too many things going on. We need to stop and pray. And we literally walked our property all the way to the sidewalks, all the way to the fence posts, because again, they're legalistic. This is our authority. This is where we have been given authority, is our property. And we prayed for that space, and everything in all four of us had issues, and it all ended that night.
We've done that for other people.
Yep.
Honestly, you just don't know what's coming into your home sometimes.
Yep.
And,
That's why scripture says, be careful who you eat with.
well,
So inviting them into the house,
right,
you be careful.
but, and yet, invite them. I mean, that's a.
And you have to make sure that you are the one that's in spiritual authority. If you're inviting someone you don't know their spiritual, what's influencing them spiritually before they come to your house, Lord, this is your place, in your name. Father, with the blood of Jesus, we pray for your protection on this home, and whatever they bring with them, keep it at the door. Let them leave the bags at the door. The old, Western, taverns, right? They used to make them leave their guns at the door.
Well, and then what is it that the Jewish people put at the top of the doors in every one of their buildings?
But that's different. That's not a spiritual binding place. So that when you walk out, they'll always touch it because it's like, as I go, may I live according to your word. And as I come home, same thing.
Am I coming in?
So it's not above the door, it's on the side.
It's on the
Yeah,
side.
so
Yeah.
theirs is on above, I've seen.
They might have the Hamsa. The Hamsa is a hand and that's a pagan thing. That's not a Jewish thing. The Muslims have the exact same
It
thing.
doesn't look like a hand.
It's a hand with the eyeball in the middle.
I had some friends that, they don't live here anymore, but she had Buddhist stuff and she had all these things, she would put coins above the doors and all this stuff. And every time I walked into the house, I would have to say a prayer before I went in. Because it was just, for me, I can feel it. The whole house, she had all over the house, and whenever she talked, sometimes she would talk about, all that kind of stuff. All Buddhist stuff.
My next door neighbor has, their house is very similar, but their whole wall is full of African masks. His dad worked for the State Department. And we used to work with a friend. I was on a board with a mission agency in Africa for years. Somebody went to Africa with us. Because it's in all the markets, you could go and buy into the markets, and she warned us, when they make those masks, they curse them. And a curse goes with it wherever that mask goes. Do not bring that into your home.
Well, right, when Jacob, right, when
Yeah.
they took some of the idols and
Yes.
it did not go well for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, good example.
Unlike Elisha's servant, Gehazi is shown the battle of the ages.
Yeah.
It's such a great.
Yep. It's real stuff, and it's just good to acknowledge that on a regular basis and maybe pump us all up to join the battle.
To not be overly, right? I mean, isn't that in Ephesians where it says, disregard it completely is as bad as giving it too much.
Yeah,
Because
so-
we know who wins.
Yeah, so one of those open doors is fear. And I can tell you stories, but that fear, because fear is lack of trust. And so when we know where we are, we don't have reason to fear. That's what the angel said, do not fear. Right? Fear is not of the Lord. We know that, we stand there. So fear is an open door. So if we always have to be cautious when we have these conversations to understand, if you're feeling anything, don't walk away until we get you confident back on your feet. Stand on your feet again, what he said to Daniel. Let's get you back on your feet again so you know where you stand. You don't need to stand in fear.
The perfect love. Of the
That's
Lord.
Yeah.
I'm so cool.
Yeah.
Because it's not to fear the lake of fire, it's to fear not being the time.
Yeah.
For eternity.
Yeah. Well, it's, yeah,
I mean, some don't even know.
Yeah. everybody good? We went way over time,
Good.
so
We could probably spend a lot more time.
we could. But you have your communities and your DNA groups to talk about, right? So let me send you with the blessing. Freddie, you want the blessing? Shoot, all these students. Yeah. Yep. Right here? Okay, here you go. As you go, may God give you peace, knowing that he walks with you, and strength, knowing that he's got it in control, and courage to go because he walks with you. Go be his hands and feet on behalf of others. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Have a great week.